Good evening. Welcome to our September 15th, or excuse me, August 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. Director Zavala Ortega, our board chair, is not available tonight. She's on a business trip, so I have the honor of filling in. I am going to go ahead and start with attendance. Director Decker.
I'm here.
Director Barrows.
Here.
Director Smith.
Here.
And I am also here. At this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Snell. Just as a reminder for our audience, this is our Committee of the Whole meeting where we review the action items that will be on the September regular business meeting. With that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Director Sproul. Thanks for everyone joining us this evening. We are reviewing potential contracts and policy and other items that could be on the September agenda. And so I have some distinguished guests here this evening to help me walk you through some of the contracts and policy. And as always, you're welcome to ask questions now or also in between now and before the next meeting. And we may be able to address those questions right now or also need to get back to you with relevant information that supports your wondering. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brett Blackschmidt to walk us through some of the contracts. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can see those, what they're talking about kind of real time. So Brett.
All right, thank you, Dr. Snell. So after a pretty busy, we asked you to act on a number of items in August at your August meeting. September shaping up to be a little lighter volume. So I have 3 items to preview for you for that September board meeting. Jumping right in, the first one is a big one, the renewal of our insurance coverages. As you know, we've been a member of the SIAW, Washington Cooperative of School Districts, that pool their liability and premiums. Unfortunately, that cooperative, like the rest of the insurance market, we're told, and I think makes some sense, is suffering from significant cost increases. So the recommendation for the 2023-24 coverages is that we continue with SIAW with the premium not to exceed 4.7 million. You can see it's just a little less than that, but that's not finally approved. So we just want to hedge in case they make a last minute adjustment through their governance process. And $210,000 for excess quake insurance. And as you see from the narrative, that's a 30% increase, which is by far the largest we've seen. So that will continue to be something that will be a challenge for us as well as other school districts and, quite frankly, other businesses as we deal with fires and storms and litigious society in general. So with that, I'll open it up if there's any questions. All right, then next one, we have a recommendation to approve intergovernmental agreement 2022-046. As you've read, this is the ESD 112 printing services. This has, again, been a longtime partner of the district, seems to meet our schools and staff needs to communicate and provide that printing services. The estimate for the 2023-24 school year is $450,000 capacity that we're seeking approval to pursue those printing services. Questions on renewing the ESD 112 printing contract? All right, then the last item I have for you is not necessarily a contract, but it's an action item relating to adult meal prices. And as you may have read from the narrative there's some governance that we're bound by around, we must charge adult prices that are consistent with the reimbursement rates that we get or in excess of the reimbursement rates that we get for the student meals. And so that necessitates one small change in the adult lunch prices at elementary and middle schools from $4.50 to $4.75. Again, just by way of reminder, all of the student meals will continue to be no cost, regardless of eligibility or previous paradigms that we had to govern those programs. So that's a continued reason to celebrate, but we just have to make that one adjustment on the adult prices. Any questions on that? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Director Sproul, would you like me to just move us into the next topic area? Okay. And so we have Taylor Richmond here this evening to walk you through some of first readings of policies. And Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Snell. So we've got 4 policies that we're recommending have some revisions for the board to consider and 1 new policy for the boards to consider. The first policy is policy 1610 on conflicts of interest. The revision recommended for this policy is in line with House Bill 1577, in which the state legislature increased the monthly contractual value for which a municipal officer may have a beneficial interest without creating a conflict of interest for the district. And that increased amount was from $1,500 to $3,000. And you see the changes reflected in track changes in the policy with the crossed out numbers in red and the new language in blue. Are there any questions about that recommended policy revision? Okay, then moving to the next policy is currently numbered policy 4000 and called communication program. The revisions that are recommended to this policy are recommended by WASDA and incorporate new requirements from House Bill 1230. This bill provides that school districts like ours that maintain a website must post links to certain public health information on the district's homepage, on the homepage for each of our schools, and also on the district's social media accounts. So VPS will be able to accomplish this by posting links to the Clark County Department of Health, and this will provide our website and social media users with access to information on substance use trends, overdose symptoms and response, firearms, and other public health topics. Again, the revisions to this policy are those recommended by WASDA. They also recommend renaming the policy from communication program to public information program and renumbering it to policy number 4001. Are there any questions about those recommendations? All right, moving to the third policy, 6215, voucher certification and approval. The revisions recommended to this policy are to update the name and the language in the policy to better reflect the current usage terms, and then also to add language to align with the state statutory requirements for account auditing. Are there any questions on these recommendations?
I did have one question. It seems on this policy, there's a spot now where the board has to review an audit. So we need an auditing committee. Is that how I read that correctly?
So this language comes directly from the RCW 28A 330.090. So it requires that the board, that any committee of the board, however the board designates that committee, audits the these expenses. So I think in consultation with the fiscal department, we determined that the current process that the board uses does satisfy the requirements of the RCW. So no change to the board's process would be necessary.
Okay, I saw that in blue, so I knew it was a new way of writing it. So I just wanted to double check that we didn't need an auditing committee.
Yeah, I think the intention is to just clarify that is
Right.
that our process is in line with the existing RCW.
Great, thank you.
I had
Thank you for the question.
I had a question as well. Is this just like any expense? I guess I'm trying to figure out what is it, because it changed it from voucher to like expense claim. So is it just like any expense that the district has, or because at one place it said no expenditure in excess of $300 may be paid out. I don't know. I guess I was just trying to figure out. The board will review and approve all payments I mean, is this any type of payment for any type of anything, or is it,
Yeah, so to your first point, the change from voucher to expense claim, that's just a terminology change. That's not intended to reflect any substantive change. But this does apply to all expenses. However, through conversation with fiscal, we were of the opinion that the current process where there's sort of a pre-approval for expenses and then an approval process for those expenses is satisfactory. So, but that would apply to expenses above $300. There are some exceptions that do not require this approval process, and I could provide some additional information to the board about what expenses those would be, if that would be helpful.
okay. No, it's okay. Just when I was first reading it, I was reading it as like expense claims, you know, like if you do, like if somebody does district travel and then they like turn in receipts, like I was thinking of it like expense claims, like claiming for, I don't know. So I was just trying to figure out like what types of expenses. But this would be like if we have to pay a company to like install carpet in a new school, or pay a construction company, or pay a, right? Or no, I don't know.
Sure. It might be helpful if I follow up with sort of some more specifics to the board about what type of expenses would fall under this and what would fall under the exceptions.
Okay.
If that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And maybe if Taylor, if it's okay, I'll just jump in real quick, so maybe I can shed a little bit of light. I think this shift from vouchers to expenses, I think has a lot to do with, because technically expense reimbursements to employees would still be paid via what they previously called vouchers, which is any accounts payable payment where we, in essence, get the invoice and then we write the warrant. The shift has been because we have a lot more ACH payments or electronic payments that don't necessarily have a voucher attached to them, or P-card purchases don't necessarily have individual vouchers. And so I think when Taylor was describing this is more in line with more modern practices, it's really the way in which we execute the payment versus any shift in, you know, the responsibility or the governance.
Okay.
Thanks, Brett. Unless there's any other questions, we'll move on to policy 6217, electronic funds transfer. Dr. Snell, if you could go up one more. There you go. Thank you. So this is a new policy, and following Brett's comments, the state's auditor's office does require that we have an authorizing policy in order to use and to make electronic payments, whether that's to employees or to vendors. So WASDA has developed a new model policy, and this policy is based on that model policy. And it would authorize the district to use electronic payment methods. Are there any questions on this policy? Okay, moving to the final policy, policy 6220, bid or proposal requirements. As with the others, these revisions are suggested by WASDA and incorporate several different things. First, they reflect input from the State Auditor's Office and the Washington Association of School Business Offices on the bid and proposal process for school districts. Second, these recommended revisions specify that prior to making a purchase, under the special terms exception of the Local Cooperation Act, that the district enter into a interlocal agreement with the cooperating public entity. Third, the revisions clarify information about procurements that use federal funds. And fourth, the revisions incorporate some of the provisions from House Bill 1086 regarding the community service organization exception to the competitive bidding laws for public works. Any questions on these revisions.
I have one, but Jeff, would you mind opening it? Because I don't know exactly where. There was a sentence that seemed to not be complete. And so I'm just
Okay,
sorry.
that would be
It was one of the
helpful
ones
if
that was adjusted. And so, and I can't remember. It's early on, so we don't have to scroll through all these pages. Down to another page. Down again, sorry. I should have taken notice to where it was. I guess it's further down than I thought. Actually, sorry. Do you mind going back up to the first page? I apologize. I should have written it down. Sorry. Oh yeah, it is. It's on the first page under 1A2, where all that read, and it says $1,000, $75,000. The district will follow informal, competitive, binding bidding procedure, and then there's nothing after and.
I think the and is intended to connect to the next, to subsection A3. Just laying out that there's three, sort of three provisions there. So
All right.
1, less than $40,000, 2, between 40 and 75, and then 3, for over 75,000.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, then that wraps up the policies for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Our last section is teaching and learning, and there are 3 items in this one. The first one is a recommendation to improve instructional materials. And in this, as usual, you have an Instructional Materials Council report. The only identified material this time was a Spanish text for the core Spanish curriculum. So that's referenced in this one. Are there any questions about that?
Oh, I just had one question. So was that the CLK? Yeah, that was CLK one. No, it was Wit and Wisdom. Yes, am I wrong?
I'm pulling it up right now to remember the official.
You wouldn't know that I looked at this just couple hours ago.
Caminos.
Amplify. Oh, it's CKL. Yeah, I just was curious. Is this for all K2 dual language? And also, what's the cost of this?
Yeah, we could pull that for you, Director Decker. I don't have
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's what this is for. So we will look at cost. And the other question is it for all K2 dual language?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, it's a tremendous program, but I also know that we can kind of get it, like the teacher part of it for free.
Okay.
Online. So I'm just curious as to who is it going to be used for, and how much is the cost?
Okay.
What bucket that's coming out of?
We can definitely follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that one?
I had one question, just clarifying the funding source. It says bond.
It's and Brett, are you on still? Because I think typically when we purchase new materials for a new building, there are some bond funds that are attached to that new building because they don't have necessarily the curriculum. So there's some allocation that goes to some of those initial costs. But yeah, I'm not sure if Brett's still on, but I'm pretty confident that's why.
I know from somebody who's moved into new buildings, I know that that's true because I've been able to order materials as part of a bond project.
So then this may just be, that kind of goes together with my question, like, is this for all of dual language, or is it just for Sarah J?
Well, and it has bond / curriculum, so it could be a little combination of both
Okay, great.
RBG and all. So we'll clarify that for the
Great.
board and make sure we get that information in a briefing for you prior to the September meeting.
Terrific,
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. The second is a renewal around iReady and supports for K-12, and it has it itemized as to what we use those resources for. And so the recommendation is to move forward with iReady for next year for those services.
Can I ask one quick question? I just noticed on the proposal, it said, I'm assuming it means that draft, sorry, the draft proposal is only good for the month, cost is only good until December, not that this contract only goes until December.
Yeah, that's my assumption as well, Director Decker, that
Okay.
give us a quote. But if there's something different from that, then we will follow up with you. But
Okay.
in talking with them, and our plan is to have benchmark assessments and formative assessments that we report out, and we have a full year calendar that we
Right.
So yeah.
I just wanted to double check because it does say there, you know, from 2023, 2024, but then it says valid until, you know, December 31st, 2023. So I just wanted to clarify. I assumed, but I also wanted to make sure that my assumption wasn't off board. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And the last item under teaching and learning is some out-of-state travel. I think this is a basketball team. Yeah, the Columbia River High School boys baseball team, excuse me, is requesting permission to travel to a baseball tournament. As you know, we get these kind of rounds of different teams, and whether it's sports or activities that are requesting out of state or out of region travel. And often these are fundraised through boosters and some fees to the students as well, and fundraisers. So this is one that on or about, looks like the spring break time is when the tournament is scheduled. Okay.
Mhm.
And at this point, that's what we have on the agenda. As you know, sometimes some items do get added, and we try to brief the board about those and making sure that the public has access to this so that they can see what the business of the district is all about. So thank you for the good questions. We'll follow up with those. And thank you to Brett and Taylor for walking us through the previous items. I'll turn it back to Director Sproul.
Thank you. Any other board director questions or comments? Okay, with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.